had to insert a week 5 in this double-part series on Patrick Lecture 48, Life Force in the Universe. And so I focused on additional exercises in finding images. Now, I find that it's easier to address concepts as they come up rather than saying, this is the concept we're going to discuss today. However, sometimes certain exercises tend to bring people to share something similar. And that has been my experience this week. So I thank the members of the group who shared their ideas of images, because it's always an individual exploration, individual perception that matters the most. So the points in this section, just to cover a little ground, is in the first place, perfection is already here. We are already perfect. We are perfect in process. Now, I like to get silly and banal, and in process can be mysterious. It can be weird. It can be a place where we are unable to truly verbalize, or if we do verbalize, we think we're verbalizing where we're going when we're verbalizing where we've been, because we still don't understand where we are. And the example I came up with is one time I looked up the chemistry of baking, and let us say a cake. Halfway through the baking process, it's not a cake yet, but it's not its original ingredients. There's an alchemy that happens during the process of baking, cooking, etc., that changes things in a way that if you took the snapshot of the interim process or tasted the interim process, it would not be the same thing. And yet you're not at the end, so how do you know where you're going? How do you know what's happening? In life, that's what growth feels like. And so we make certain assumptions. We throw darts in the air. We think we know where we're going. But in truth, until we get to the summary phase of a process where we're able to rest a bit and look back, can't be completely sure. So the game is you're already perfect. Your positive intent to engage in the process of growth and development is the perfection itself. And your mistakes, your trial and error, your groping is part of the process. So the Patrick mantra that I used for a long time was, there are no mistakes, there are no accidents. There are not even coincidences or luck. It's all part of a process that I may not understand for another 10, 20, 30, 50 years. I may not even understand it until I pass through to the world of spirit and leave behind my ego, which compels me to try to figure this all out. So, as an exercise, I suggested making a list of events that felt unfair or unjust to you 10 years ago. Why 10 years ago? Because you have some possibility of having some, you are able to understand what that might be about to some extent. And what I wanted people to do was to list those events and then be able to recap why they no longer feel that way. So in other words, you cast yourself back to what you thought 10 years ago, and then you realize that that was 10 years ago, and you don't necessarily agree with it today. But why? What did you learn? What did you realize? What are you now able to accept at the time you were protesting, you were resistant to? And it's an example, by looking back, of where you may be now, thinking something is unjust or unfair. And you can't know what you're going to think or believe in 10 years. The idea is to be generous and gentle with yourself, to allow these feelings of unfairness and injustice, while not saying, and there's a solution, and I'm right in seeking that solution. So trying to be a little, I'm going to use the word fuzzy. The correct word is likely generous, with I think there's something wrong, and I believe it should be addressed. And I believe that there are certain tools that can be enacted now. And your freedom to reach for those tools without a sense of this is the only way or right, wrong. So then, after having done that, to then take a look at what does perfect mean to you? And to bring up the untruths of perfect. There's a place where perfect tends to mean done. So we want to be perfect because then we're done. And in a lighthearted way, as a human being, you're never going to be done. And that's hard to accept. But once again, if we take the banal examples that I use a lot, please forgive this. You're never going to be done eating. You're never going to be done breathing or taking care of your body or taking care of your surroundings. It requires maintenance. And in that maintenance, you'll get new ideas. You'll want to do new things. You'll want to try new things because you're not going to reach any state of doneness. But you can explore and experiment and find many things that you're completely comfortable with that don't seem to need any more tweaking or fixing, while that gives you time and space for things that may need tweaking or fixing. So this is how I approach the idea of images. Work on what bothers you, but with a generous and loving attitude, rather than I have to fix this or this is wrong. So there are many, many examples of, for instance, our attitude towards God. I collected a list of movies that theoretically were about the God image. I didn't necessarily agree with this list, but it was an interesting list, and half of it was useful. But my point is this, that looking at what is perfection, what is spirit, what is the right way, the wrong way, is an obsession with humans. We write books about it, we make movies about it, we talk about it. Our justice system attempts to achieve this. Our legal system attempts to achieve this. Our legislatures, everything. We have a sense of what is perfect, and there's truth in that, in the ultimate spiritual sense. But to try to make human beings and their activities on the planet perfect is like trying to make your breathing process perfect. It is perfect for you in the moment, or it needs correction, which is a perfect process for you to follow. So the next question that comes up is, why is the world imperfect? Well, number one, it is perfect for what we need to learn. But what is the purpose of the imperfect world? Since we are imperfect, we bleed that into the world. In other words, what was perfect, we will mess with because we are imperfect. So what is perfect? Take a look at the original primeval forest. It's perfect for what it was meant to do. And man goes in there and he won't leave it alone. He messes with it. He chops down trees to make a house so he can live in the primeval forest. But by doing so, he's changing the primeval forest. He's converting it to his use, which may or may not be perfect. So where I go on that, the mantra again that I use is, if the universe is benign, if there's truly no right, wrong agenda, and I'm free to find my way because I'm trusted to find my way. So like a little kid, you go ahead and try, and we'll correct you once in a while. We'll give you support and help, but we trust you to become an adult. That is what is going to happen. And you'll hit bumps along the way, and you'll embrace bad friends. You'll do terrible things, but there will be a self-righting that will come to you with age and maturity that will take care of all this to some degree. That's the perfection part, rather than trying to make every moment perfect. Hard thing for parents, including me, to deal with on an everyday basis. So key aspects of images to help you find yours. Number one, images are meant to protect us from pain. Now, pain is a big topic and it's very subjective. So images are formed to prevent us from anything that we decide is unpleasant, anything that we perceive as unpleasant, anything that jolts us or makes us feel uncomfortable or makes us work harder than we want to work. And the reason it's so subjective is if I'm having fun, I might work a great deal. And then I address something I don't want to do, and suddenly it's work. And I get very tired and grumpy, and it feels like I'm clock watching because I don't want to do it. So pain is similar to that. Pain is, as I define it, a mixture of pressure and fear. There's a deadline or there's a consequence, and there's a fear of that deadline or consequence. And that's what turns an experience from neutral to pain. Can happen on any level of our consciousness. So there's always a level of fear in our perception of what is painful. We have to elevate ourselves from the, I cut myself with a knife, I felt pain. Well, yes, the pain is a message. Don't cut yourself with a knife, and address it, or it'll become more painful and demand more attention until it heals, and then it won't be painful anymore because it doesn't need to send that message. Now, do scars send painful messages? Yes, and this enters into a different realm. Sometimes we need to be reminded of an incident or an attitude that got us involved in an incident so that we won't do that again. So the pain there would be minor in comparison to the actual incident, but it would still remain because we need the message. So there's always an element of fear that creates pain. And so there's always a life or death element, a life or death outcome involved. And our forcing current is always going to lead us to life. We always choose life over death. Now, death is so feared that we may be incapable of verbalizing it, incapable of visualizing it or imagining it or putting words to it, because the superstition is then it will exist. So sometimes the easiest way to find the life-death duality is notice what you're aiming towards, because that will always represent life. And then you need to intuit, self-analyze, understand, figure out what you're running away from. What is that horrible alternative to the life-affirming reality? Once again, this is individual. It's expressed very individualistically, so that there's no formula that can be used other than these general outlines. So I hope you might enjoy exercises in finding your images and unraveling them and seeing what the core untruth is, that life-death duality, and seeing a deeper possibility, deeper options that you can take so that you're not running away from something, but rather optimizing. And that has less of a forcing current. It has less of a threat, because optimizing something, the opposite of that is not death. It's just a little disorder, takes up a bit more time. And it's something we would prefer not to do. So it's when it feels very mild, that's one of the indications that an image is not in force. So Patrick Lecture 48, Life Force in the Universe. This section was on finding images and different ways of doing that. Thanks for listening. I hope you take a look at the lecture.